Hi there, Mike Yurth here. This is the latest Yurthworks production. Today we're going to make a bow stand. So, with some basic simple parts that are relatively cheap, we should be able to make a stand that can wheel around, carry our targets, carry our bows and arrows, and then be able to do different distances for outdoor practicing. So, one of the tricks I learned is if you go to Home Depot, anything with a purple stripe on it is their discount lumber. So I found these in the 70% off rack. 3/4 inch piece of particle board, 4 foot by 8 foot wide. Normally pretty expensive. I got it for like $8. These wheels I got at Harbor Freight for $5 a piece. Basic screws, basic cheap little 2x4s, and one nice piece of finished pine that was also on the 70% off rack because that end was chipped. So we should be able to make this pretty cheap and should be pretty functional. So we're going to set it up, this one, so that it can hold bows horizontally with the big stabilizer for target bows, and also have pins on the end where you can just hang it in between shots. And then we can also adjust it so that we can set up a recurve or whatever other bow somebody comes to visit or whatever. Okay, so hopefully this will help you guys understand how to do it quick and easy.
Okay, so the first thing we have to do is cut this 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood to the length of the cart. I decided to make the cart 48 inches long, so it's half the length of the plywood. So we cut the plywood in half, and then we've got to decide how wide we're going to make the cart itself, and I wanted it to be able to fit through a regular doorway. So the maximum width that I wanted to have the cart base was 28 inches. So I measured it out to 28 inches, laid it out on the table saw, and cut the base. So now we have the base. It's 48 by 28. Now I have to figure out how to make the struts and the axle system for the tires. So I make some vertical risers and put one lengthwise strut in between those. And that 2x4, that's the widthwise 2x4, is 16 inches wide. And then there's two 8-inch high vertical 2x4s that the axle will screw into. And you have to make sure those are going to fit and leave enough space for the tires to clear. And then I put two 6.5-inch ones next to it.
Okay, so here's one of the confusing parts. I thought I'd stop and do a little bit more video here. So these wheels, when you buy them at Harbor Freight, have a 5/8 inch hub. That means you can go buy a 5-inch diameter bolt at Home Depot or somewhere, and it'll slip right in there. But you really need a couple of big washers. So what I did is I set up a washer there, and a washer here, and then I drilled 2 holes that are just undersized in these 2 pieces of plywood. They're going to go, the axle is going to screw tightly into this wood, and then those 2 pieces are going to sit like that up against that frame, and that'll make it strong enough that it won't want to bounce around and come apart, and this bolt will thread part way into the second piece of wood. So that'll be a nice stable support, and these will be screwed together from every angle with wood screws.
Okay, so first we have to make sure that the holes in the wood are threaded so that you can get the bolt in there and everything's going to line up and the 2 holes are aligned together correctly. So I do that before I screw everything together. Make sure the bolts go through, make sure the holes are deep enough, make sure everything's lined up and not out of alignment. Then I always countersink so my screws go all the way in and the heads are not sticking out. And you want to screw the struts together. So the 8-inch vertical struts get screwed in from the side, and then the 6.5-inch vertical struts get screwed to them. And then they also get screwed down from the top so that everything is held together at every angle, and that reinforces the physics of it. Okay, so make sure all the pieces are tight. Make sure that whole U shape is completely strong. Then you put the washers on the axles, put the axles through the wheels, and screw them into the wood. Just tight enough that they can slip. So don't tighten them all the way down, otherwise you'll cause friction and it won't roll smoothly. Okay, now I'm going to make the struts for the front. It's just one piece of 2x4 that's 28 inches wide and 2 vertical pieces, and that'll be the struts for the front end. So line everything up. I had to lift it up and put it on a stool so that the wheels didn't run away while I was screwing everything together. Countersink all the holes, put all the screws in, and that holds everything together. Okay, now we're going to have two lengthwise 2x4s that run the length of the bottom of the base. So find the center of the base. They're going to be separated by the width of one 2x4 coming through the top. So we figure out those spacings and mark where those runners are going to go on the bottom. Okay. So now we're going to drill guide holes from the bottom so that you know they're going to be in the center of the 2x4s without having to guess. Then from the top, you countersink the tops. Okay, now we're going to mark where the 3 vertical runners are going to come through the top of the wood. And we're going to have to cut those pieces out. They have to get removed so that the 2x4s can come through from the top side. So I drilled some guide holes. I have a couple little saw attachments that go on my drill. You can use a jigsaw, you can use a coping saw, whatever you got. It doesn't have to be exact. You just got to get that 2x4 piece out of the base so that a 2x4 can go through there in those 3 places, center and both ends. Okay, then you put all the screws in the lined up holes. You put the lengthwise runners on the bottom and screw them into place from the top side so that those are fixed securely to the base. Okay, that's what it should look like from the bottom. Now we're going to cut the vertical runners, or the risers. There's going to be 3 of those. You got to make sure they're in the holes. You got to make sure they're square to the base, and then screw them to the 2x4s that you just set up on the bottom of the base. Okay, now we're going to cut off the bad end of our nice piece of pine, cut it to length, set up the holes, and screw it all together.
Okay, so the frame is built, the wheels are on, the basic cage is set up. Now this is where the custom part happens, depending on what kind of bows you're going to use and how you're going to set it up. The easiest way for me to do it today, I'm going to take this 1-inch dowel and cut it into 6 pieces. And I'm going to put 2 posts hanging out the side for one bow on one 2x4. And then I'll put 2 posts hanging out the other side on another 2x4 for horizontal. And then I'll put 1 in each end so you can hang a bow vertically. And you can change the spacing by drilling more holes, and you can just move the peg. And then you can change the height by just taking a couple of the screws out and moving the 2x4 up and down as you need to. I'm just going to set it for my bow and my son's bow, but you can have it adjustable where you drill multiple holes. You could just move the pegs in and out as you need to for the width, and it should work pretty good. And then I'm going to make sure it's high enough for my stabilizer to not hit the base. And then I'll just put a rope or something on the end so you can pick up the one end without the wheels and just tote it. Should work pretty good.
Okay, so now we're going to figure out the spacing for my bow. Cut the horizontal 2x4 that's going to support the dowels. Figure out the spacing for the dowels and cut the dowels to length. And then you have to figure out exactly where you want to put those dowels to hold the frame of the bow in horizontal mode. So drill the holes not all the way through, the same diameter as the dowels, and then sand them so they'll just pressure fit in there. Figure out how high you want that crossbar. Countersink all the holes in the 2x4 and then just screw it together. Same thing with my son's bow. You figure out where his is going to be, drill the holes, put the dowels in there, and get this height right. Then you have to adjust it. Also, you have to cut the holes for the end posts.
So, as you can see, I can put my bow with the long stabilizer horizontally here for transporting around, moving the wagon around. I'm probably going to put a piece of PVC down there to hold that so that it can't tip. I can throw a couple targets here. My son's a little guy, so he's got a lower rack. He can reach in. He's left-handed, so he grabs with the other hand. His bow can sit like that. He's got his little target. And like I said, you could drill multiple holes for these pegs so you could move them around. They're just pressure fit. I just sanded the end and stuffed it in the hole. I drilled it with a 1-inch Forstner bit. So you can move that around. You could just take out these screws and move that 2x4 up and down on the stack as you need to. If you need them higher, you want to have a recurve or whatever. And then there's 2 out here on the end now, so when you're actually shooting, you don't have to put it back this way. You can just walk up, hang it on the end, and go get your arrows. So now what I'm going to do is take this piece of 2-inch PVC and I'm going to cut some pieces. I'll probably put them down here in the middle next to those 2x4s so we can put arrows in there. And then we'll have all the arrows, all the targets, all the bows. The other thing is, when we're getting ready to transport it, that can go on there. Our quivers and stuff can hang on the ends. Just like that. And then I'm going to put a rope or a handle right here. All you have to do is pick that up, and those wheels let you just carry it around. Okay? So that thing's sturdy enough, you can handle quite a bit of weight. You can take it in the dirt, you can take it in the grass. You can go set up targets and drag it around, and then just wheel the whole thing in one unit back in the garage. I don't have to put the bows back in the cases. I don't have to put everything away. I can just get out and shoot and then put it back quick. Okay, makes sense. The other thing I think I'm going to do is take some of that soft squishy matting that you put in the bottom of a drawer that keeps things from slipping, and I'm going to wrap these so that the bows don't want to slip off the slick wood, and there'll be a little bit of padding on there so nothing gets scratched.
So I cut the roll of no-slip to the length of the post, cut it into some squares, and then wrap each square around the post, and then I just use Gorilla Tape to hold it on.
Okay, so the day I started working on this, I got almost done. Got some padding on those posts, put all the stuff on there, and it works. It's pretty functional. The only thing I didn't get finished was the strap, and I took a piece of rope and paracorded a handle so I can hook it down there on the bottom and have something to tow it around with. Problem is, when I loaded it all up with the bows and all of the targets I've got, it wasn't too bad for me, but my son would have a hard time picking it up and dragging it around without knocking it over and stuff. So I decided to go ahead and spend the extra 15 bucks and buy 2 more wheels and the bolts and washers and everything I needed. And so I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 struts off the front and put another set of wheels on there. So just so it'll be easier and more stable for him to pull around. And then I'll add the handle on the bottom.
Okay, so I made another wheel rig, exactly the same dimensions and setup as the one on the other end. Line it up to the front of the cart and screw it in. And then I also drill a hole and add an eye screw, a big eye hook, to tie the handle to so that I've got something that pulls into the beef and doesn't come apart.
Okay, so here's the final finished product. It's got 6 posts, 1 side post on each end for hanging bows vertically, 2 side posts on each side for hanging bows horizontally. Now it's got 4 wheels instead of 2, and it's got a paracorded handle on the rope hooked on there with a bungee cord. So I can just undo the bungee cord, grab the handle, and drag it around. And then that bungee cord keeps out of the way from the bows when they're on there. And then, if we tip it up, this shows you what it's like on the underside. You can see those 2x4s are not the straightest thing in the world, but functionally it's fine. It doesn't need to be expensive. So this way, with the 4 wheels on it, my son can drag it around. He can lift it a little to turn it, but he doesn't have to keep the front end off the ground the whole time. For an adult, it's not a big deal. You really just need 2 tires. And it depends on how much other stuff you had on there. I have 3 or 4 bales, plus 2 bows, plus all the quivers, so get that all loaded up. It's quite a bit. Just make sure everything's tight. Make sure the wheels have air in them. And should be good to go. Hope you enjoy.